I believe my mom was maybe trying to protect herself and her children from what? I don't know. Now that I found my dad and we have a relationship and I'm part of that family, I don't know what that fear was.
Welcome back to Family Twist. This week, Kendall is chatting with Debbie Smith Olson from the DNA Surprise Network about her surprising discoveries and the emotional, sometimes bewildering journey of discovering and connecting with biological family members you never even knew existed. Hers is a journey of identity, unexpected joy, and sometimes complex challenges. So let's get ready to explore those deeply personal narratives and what they mean for those who embark on such a path. Welcome, Debbie.
Hi, Corey. Thank you. I appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, I'm Kendall.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I knew that. You know what? I'm
That's
reading
okay.
the screen, Corey and Kendall.
Yeah, I know.
Yep.
We always put that up there like that. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, and Corey was going to join us today, but we had a happy, unexpected, his cousin, we're really close with his cousin, and his cousin used to live in Boston
Mhm.
near us. And they moved to Switzerland, he and his girlfriend, and he just needed to be in Boston this week. So he's like, is here, like physically visiting. So it's great.
Yeah, that is fun.
But
Good for him.
yeah, yeah. It's so funny how it's like how much we enjoy my family that we found, but then of course it's so
Yeah,
great to have his
his as
kind of,
well.
and not, they are not surprise people in his life,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
people that he's known all of his life. So, well, first of all, thank you for the work that you do through the network. Well, I wanted to talk about that some, as well as your story. Your personal story is so interesting, and I admire you for not, well, for making the choice to not, I don't even know if burden is the right word, but your biological mother with your discovery. I think that takes a lot of fortitude on your
Mhm.
side,
Yeah.
because and maybe you can speak about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know you found your biological father in 2019,
Yep.
and along with two surprise half siblings,
Yes, two siblings I didn't know I had. Yeah.
which is amazing and wonderful. And I know exactly how that feels. So,
Yes.
but I do, I'm really sensitive to the fact that you were, is lied to. Is that the right?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
Is that
Yes.
okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I never know how that will sound. I know you're not, your goal isn't to dog out your biological family, but do you know why that even happened? Why you
I
were,
don't know. I don't know. I believe my mom was maybe trying to protect herself and her children from what? I don't know. Now that I found my dad and we have a relationship and I'm part of that family, I don't know what that fear was. Um,
mm-hmm.
but that would be my assumption is there was just a level of fear that she would lose us or we'd choose him over her. That's the only thing that I can sort
Yeah.
of conclusion that I can come to.
Hmm. And her other children, do they know about your discovery?
Yes, so I actually have two full siblings. So we have this dad as their
Oh,
dad as well. It's been an interesting experience because I've sort of jumped in with both feet, didn't really look
yeah.
back, and have moved on to having a relationship with him. He lives in Canada. When he remarried, a woman from Canada. They're still together now. She's the mom of my step siblings, which I hate using that word. They're just my siblings. It never feels step, of course. Um,
Right.
but I guess for the sake of clarification, that is, my half sibling. So he's still married to
Yeah.
her, and so they live in Canada. She's from Canada. They live in Canada. So I've been fortunate enough to be able to go there and spend time with them, whereas the other
Mm-hmm.
two have not, and they don't really seem interested in building the kind of relationship that I have. I know they speak to him and they do have a relationship, but not to the degree that I do. So it's been an
Mm.
interesting dynamic.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So forgive me. So you found these half siblings. How were they raised? I guess I'm confusing which household they were in.
So they were raised with my dad and their mom. They knew that
Okay.
my dad had three other children. We were never a secret. They had, in fact, over the years, sort of looked for us. I live in Idaho. My dad knew that we were in Idaho somewhere. He, of course, knew our first names, but we were step parent adopted. So our last names had
Right.
changed and he didn't know our last name. And he only knew the month and year of our birth. He didn't remember our birth dates exactly.
Hmm.
So, you have to remember this was before even cell phones or anything like that. There was no social
Yep.
media, nothing like that. So he would do things like write to the DMV when he thought we were getting our driver's licenses or things like that. And of course, nothing ever happened. Nobody's going to be like, oh, here's a list of the boys you think might be your child or, the girls,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
So he
Wow.
did try to sort of search for us in any way that he could, but, just never
Hmm.
really had any luck.
I just feel like that's, I mean, of course, sad for you,
Yeah.
and your siblings, but I mean, how hard for him. I speak to my own biological father about that because, he, well, neither of my parents were really given much of a choice because they were both so young. They were, 15 and 16 when I was born.
Hmm.
So, but my dad always wanted to find me. And when I met his ex-wife, the mother of two of my half siblings, I remember she hugged me immediately and said, "Honey, you were the baby that we couldn't find." You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like
Hmm.
she knew about me and she wanted to help raise me, and
And it's a
just
really
wasn't.
lovely feeling when that happens because when I matched my sister and we started talking, she immediately knew who I was. And to
Wow,
not have been a secret to them, for them to be like, no, we knew you existed. We tried to find you. It's really comforting. It's really lovely to know that they cared enough and really did want to be in your life.
for sure. And my dad, and not just my dad, but other people in the family say that my as silly as it may sound for a 16-year-old to say this to his parents, like my dad wanted to, if not marry my mother, he wanted to at least raise me with her. You know what I mean? He
Hmm.
wanted it to be a family unit. And
Sure.
now, would that have been the best choice? Maybe not, but at least he wanted it.
Right.
So yeah, it's and then you think about all the years that you didn't have, you know,
Hmm.
and you comment. I read the information on your website. Well, actually, I shouldn't call it your website, should I? We should call it the DNA
DNA Surprise Network. Yeah.
Surprise Network.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it was about you, and I just thought it was really, interesting that you kind of addressed that issue on there.
Yeah, I think that people forget. They think that, oh, you found your family and now it's all smooth sailing and everything's happy and well. And while there is an element of that, excuse me, there's still that part of, wasn't part of this family and I don't know their Christmas traditions and all those things, right?
Right.
Like you just still don't really fit, even though you're accepted and loved and all those things. There's still that dynamic of discomfort and trying to find where you do fit in that space.
Right. No, it's totally true. And I have a local brother and a local sister, half siblings, and they don't always see eye to eye. And so I was delusional enough to think that we were all going to be the Brady Bunch. You know what I mean? And that it was everybody's going to get, and it just is, it's real life. And I had built up this delusion about the way that it would work. And I'm a control freak. So for me, it was like, I know that about myself. And I have kind of a savior complex, like where I'm used to coming into a situation and fixing a problem, and we're all going to hug it out, and you know what I mean, like
Right.
that's just
Yeah.
who I am. And to walk into a situation where that really was never going to happen, it's just,
Mhm.
it was startling. It was like, can't we all get along,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you know shame on me for kind of creating this delusion, right, that this is the way that it's going to happen, because it's probably just like every other family. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. We're all only
Yeah,
human.
exactly, exactly. And what I've learned from that, I think, is to give people a little bit more grace, to not be as critical of the fact that it isn't a perfect scenario, and we
Yes.
are gonna have we are gonna have disagreements, and we are gonna be rude to each other occasionally, and things like that.
Right.
But which was weird for me because until I was 11, when my adoptive father married his second wife, I had been an only child. And so I kind of didn't really have that dynamic in my life. Like there was nobody to argue with,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Nobody to take your
And then
things or any of like that stuff that siblings
that's
do to each
right.
other. Yeah.
That's right. And then when I got my stepsister, who she actually passed away in March unexpectedly, but she and I were the same age. There were only 6 weeks between us in age. So getting a stepsister before seventh grade was startling. I think is a nice, we loved each other but it oil and water.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about the DNA Surprise Network. I just think you have a cool mission, and talk about the purpose of it.
I think much like a lot of other people, when we have this life event happen, we don't know where to go. You know that this has sort of messed with your equilibrium, so to speak, and you just feel off and alone and all that stuff. I am very lucky because my husband's also adopted. He has reunited with his birth mom. He reunited with her 20 years ago, so they have had quite a relationship for a long time. He has three sisters. He's actually kind of working on building a relationship with his dad at this point, but he very much understood where I was coming from, where you're sort of thrown off kilter and you don't really know where to go. And much like everybody else, you go on social media, you search Google, my dad. I just found my dad, things like that, crazy searches you do because you don't know what
Yeah.
else to say. This is what
Right.
happened. Yeah. So from there, I had been training as a life coach, and I just decided that, our community really does need mental health support and people who they can talk to and all those things. And so it sort of blossomed from there. And I just have continued to work on it. And it's where my heart is. I love it. I've been involved with Right to Know now with Cara. She's, I've been invited and accepted a position on the board with her. So it's really been moving along nicely. And I just, want to be a resource for people to turn to when they have some kind of crazy life altering experience,
Yeah.
good,
Well,
bad, or
I can
otherwise.
see exactly. It's funny. I overwhelmingly, yes, the difference between my birth father's family always wanting to find me and my birth mother lying about, you know what I mean? Like nobody even knew I existed. There's a big dichotomy there, but overwhelmingly it's been a positive experience, right? So
Mhm.
I wouldn't change it for the world. But it was still, when I came into this situation again, I came at it from this level of delusion where I'm going to make everything great and wonderful. And it just took me a while to accept that it wasn't going to go the way that I wanted it to go.
Mhm.
And I'm not used to that. I'm just, I'm a planner. You know, I mean, Corey and I did pick up sticks and just on a whim move from where we lived in St. Louis to San Francisco. And then when I found this family, moved from San Francisco to New England. So, I mean, that wasn't planned, but I'm saying I've had good life plans. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I just thought, I could control all of those things. And I never knew that I would need things like the resources that you're helping to provide. I
Yeah, and I
just,
think that's one of the things is it does take a minute for the dust to settle because initially you are quite euphoric. I think it took me about a year to say, okay, I don't feel like good about life right now. Like things are really challenging me. And, for me to go to therapy and work with a life coach and all those things, it was a good year before I was sort of out of that euphoria. Everybody says coming out of the fog. It just takes a minute for the
mhm.
dust to settle.
Yep, I agree. And for me, and I didn't think this would be part of the equation, but for me, doing this podcast has been one of the most therapeutic things that I've ever done. I mean, yes, that's completely aside, but I never knew I needed this. I
Mhm.
never thought that I needed to talk to people about my story because my adoptive life was good, and it sounds like yours was too, right? With your father
Yeah,
who
I mean,
adopted.
I had a great life growing up. We didn't have a lot like many people. It's not like I was, rolling in the dough with my family and living in nice houses. There were some struggles, but we
Yeah.
were certainly cared for and loved and all of those things. The difficult dynamic would come into place when we would ask about our biological dad and our mom would just,
Mhm.
no, we don't do that. We don't
Yeah.
talk about him. So that was always really hard.
Yeah.
And when I decided to search for him much later in life. And when I was searching for him, I just had no information and I knew I could get none from her, which of course led to doing
Mhm.
a DNA test. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
it is. And to your previous point, I mean, by the time I hit 40, and it was kind of before the DNA stuff was ever even out there, I don't want to say I had given up, but I kind of just had
Mhm.
resigned myself, like, well, I don't know how else to look for these people, you know? And I say these people because in my mind, I was just thinking there have to be some people out there that I can find. You know what I mean? Like there, one person will be great.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like,
Sure. And that's
and
exactly how I felt when I took the DNA test because
yeah,
my mom had told me my dad was deceased. And so there's a website called Find a Grave, and I went on Find a Grave and tried to find my dad. And he has a very common name, and he's from, Utah, so wasn't really successful. And so
yeah,
at that point, that's when I decided to do a DNA test. And that was exactly my thought. Well, there'll be one person. There'll be at least
yeah,
one person that I'll match to that will have known something about my dad that can say something nice about him because we really never did
yeah,
hear nice things,
mm,
So that was my goal,
yeah,
just one person.
yeah, yeah. And for me, that first match was my half brother in Massachusetts who had been looking for me since 1988. It was just that epiphany. It was that, oh my gosh. And my brother Chris knew so much more about my birth than I did. You know what I mean? Like because I remember in the first minute we were on the telephone, he's like, so how's Jackie? And I was like, who's Jackie? He's like, oh, you really don't know anything, do you? And I was like, no. He's like, that's your birth mother. I was like, you know what I mean? Just,
Yeah,
it,
you had a name all of a sudden out of the blue.
it I can't explain the way that it just gave me chills. Like
Hmm.
it was bizarre. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
like that here's this whole side of the family that, knew her and knew her name and her first and last names, but again, very common,
Yeah.
name. And I was like, oh, but my father didn't know where she ended up. He didn't know,
Hmm.
so it took us, and it's funny. I'm I Corey would say I'm very impatient. And I can be because I've always made things happen. But I found Chris on August 23rd, and it was on Labor Day. So, not a week and a half later, when he finally got the clue from our father that helped us find the right woman with that common name. And in 5 minutes, I found her on Facebook, and I figured it was just the stars aligned, right? And I was
Hmm.
like, it almost felt, I almost had a little guilt because it happened kind of so quickly the way you know what I mean?
I
Like
do. Yeah.
when I hear all these other people who've just struggled and,
Yep.
just,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
exactly how I felt. And I think that that's partly why I was like, okay, something's wrong because I'm feeling guilty that I have this success story, if you will. And in our community, we do have so many people who are, not accepted or their parent is deceased or, there's so many different scenarios.
mm,
So that's exactly how I felt, was very guilty because I had had this great experience and I'm
yeah,
having a great experience with the
yeah,
whole thing. Yeah.
yeah. I was talking to one of my high school friends who knew that I was adopted. I mean, everybody, my hometown's as big as the room I'm sitting in. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
it's everybody knew everything. And it was never a secret, and I was never embarrassed, and there was never stigma associated with being adopted. And I was telling my friend Melissa right after I found this family, like, it feels so weird to feel like an only child, and then to have six half siblings and then 13 nieces and nephews from zero. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it was bizarre and unreal. So I'd love to have Melissa on the shows because she has an interesting story too. Um,
They're very surreal moments when these things happen. And I think even as prepared as you think you might be, you just are never prepared. No matter how if you spend every day reading books about, someday I'm going to be reunited with my long lost family, I still don't think that you can just ever really, it's just such a surreal experience. I just don't know, you know?
yep. No, it's true. And I'm so fortunate, and I don't take this for granted, that the only people that had already passed away were my grandparents on both sides. They were all gone. they're the people I really wanted to speak, because like they were the decision makers about
Mhm.
why it was given away. So really, they're the only people that could answer those questions. But then my father had a brother who passed away young. But apart from that, like all my siblings are living, you know what I mean? Like I feel
Mhm.
so fortunate. I just hear such stories that, like you mentioned, where someone will make this discovery and the parent just died last month. You know what I mean? Just
Yes.
tragic. It's like, and I feel, yeah, so fortunate. And thank goodness, Corey, it's funny. For in 2017 is when I made my discovery, and Corey got me my DNA kit for my birthday, and my brother's wife got him his for his birthday.
That's so
So
interesting.
just the same, yeah. So Chris did his in February. I got mine in July. I got my results in August, and Chris teased me and said, "What took you so long?" You know, it's just it was just, again, I don't believe in fate and all that stuff, but it is the
Very, very
coincidences.
serendipitous for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the coincidences are like, wow, you know.
And mine was a year. My mother's family has done their genealogy very well. And so when I, got my results, I saw all of that family that I sort of knew already.
Mhm.
That is one thing that my mom did. She sort of took us away from everyone's family because I think she didn't want my dad to know where we were. So we really didn't grow up with any aunts and uncles or anything like that. My
Hmm.
stepdad's family lives in the same city that I live in, and they were a part of our lives, but growing up, that was the only family that I grew up with.
Right.
So when I got my results, I'd seen my mom's family, kind of already knew all those names, knew who those people were. Then I had very distant matches. And so I was very frustrated. And I sincerely didn't look at Ancestry again for a year. So my sister had matched to me in January of 2019, but I didn't see it until the end of April.
Yeah.
So she's like, my dad kept saying, we just thought you were mad and you didn't want to meet us. And
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I literally just didn't look at it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting because now, because I've made all these discoveries and I know so many people, I find myself not going on as often as I should,
Yeah.
um, because my dad even jokes that he's like, well, you could have a couple of other. I'm like, oh, please don't say that. You know what I mean? Like, not
Yeah.
off the cuff like that.
Yeah.
But because we three boys are very close. So I was born in July of 1970. My brother Todd, by a different girl, they were not, none of them were women, by a different girl, was born in August of 71. And then still a third girl in my brother Chris was born in February of 72. So we are really,
Yeah.
close. But yeah, and he married my stepmother. But so we were like, Dad, how many could be out there? It's like,
Yeah.
uh,
Yet
I,
another plot
yeah,
twist.
I tell you,
Yeah.
we joke, my brother Chris and I say, well, we pop it open every once in a while thinking, who's
Yeah.
my closest match? You know?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Which
ironically, my
Chris is.
sister and my dad's half sister are my closest matches now. And I've since learned that my dad's an NPE. He was raised by his
Oh,
grandparents, believing they were his parents, when it was his oldest brother that was his biological dad. So,
really?
yeah, yeah.
Wow. And he didn't learn about, I mean,
No one
what
ever
age
said
was he?
anything at all to him. He just always was raised that way. He was, of course, the youngest of all the siblings, and he just
Sure.
figured he was the oopsie kid, right? And
Yeah.
then his biological mother apparently had some children with a few different men. And one
Mm.
of the sisters wanted to find all of her siblings. And so I don't know how she found him. I don't know if one of them knew where my dad went or how that all went down, but he ended up finding
Mm.
out that he has like six siblings, or maybe there's six of them, and he's kind of in the middle of them. So, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Which is, I mean, it's wonderful that your grandparents were able to keep, you know what I mean, take care of him and
Hmm.
keep him. And that's wonderful. At least he still got that family connection,
Right.
I try not to judge my deceased grandparents for
Hmm.
not doing the same for me. Like
Sure.
when I think about all the people that I know who are raising their own grandchildren,
Hmm.
I feel like that's just a kind of a responsible thing to do. But who am I to say?
Yeah.
I try not to get on that soapbox.
Hmm. I
But
think
I,
it's becoming so much more socially acceptable for when things happen. I think that I'm hoping the society,
yeah,
parents, we're coming along to like, oh, this happened. What's a good way we can resolve this? And not
yeah,
everybody's being forced to give their child up
right.
for adoption or those things.
Yeah, I feel like it's all it takes is one, you know what I mean? Like one silly moment, right? Where you do
Hmm.
something that you shouldn't have, and then there's a baby involved. And I
Right.
wish that even back then there couldn't have been a little bit more understanding given, like
Hmm.
it's interesting because when I was a child, my parents were very open about it was a private adoption, so they didn't know anything, but they let me talk about it all the time. They let me ask all kinds of questions and let me speculate till my heart was content. And I would say things like, well, what do you think? Was as if they had any
Hmm.
clue. I'd say, what do you think? And my mom would say things like, well, she used to call her my birth mommy. She said, your birth mommy might just not have, she might not have been well, or she might not have felt ready to take care of a baby. So they made it as positive as it could be with the fact that they had no details.
Yeah.
And they just removed all that stigma for me, because,
Hmm.
when my fear for a child is that they feel like they're in some way responsible, for being given up, and I never, ever felt that.
Yeah. That's nice.
It,
Good.
yeah, I did have an evil cousin whose name she will remain nameless on this podcast, but she's a little bit older than I was, and she'd say rude things sometimes, like, well, your parents just didn't want to keep you. And I'm like, A, shut up, you don't know what you're talking about. And B, how rude.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you don't know any more than I do.
Right.
But I had that fortitude. I
Hmm.
wasn't going to let her talk to me like that. And I had no shame about being adopted. And I wish that for everybody. And I know it's just not always the case,
Right.
you know. Yeah.
Yeah, and I used to be embarrassed. We weren't allowed, like I said, we weren't allowed to speak about our dad or ask questions. And so it was embarrassing to me, with if people
Hmm.
when people would discover that the man raising me wasn't my biological dad and they would ask questions, I was always very embarrassed. It was shameful for me. So that was something that was hard for me to sort of get over and work through that, because you get this idea that, oh, they didn't want me, right? What's wrong with
Right.
me? And then
Right.
once you can kind of get past that, then it's easier.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is
Yeah.
some
And
shame.
and I do think for you, it's a little different because you had your mother, right? Like you knew she was your mother. So it's different. For me, I felt like maybe my dad didn't even know about me. You know what I mean? Like I was
Right.
very realistic about that when I was like 5. I would say to my parent, maybe my dad didn't even know I existed. And he did, but I didn't know that.
Sure.
My parents were just the greatest at normalizing things. They're like, doesn't matter. You're our kid. We
Yeah.
love you. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
good luck finding them someday. They were so supportive of that potential surge. And that's what makes me angry at my birth mother, that,
Hmm.
that, that I had their blessing, they
Right.
wanted me to find people. And my mother just acts like I'm that dirty little secret that just still can't come out. It's like,
Right.
whatever. That's on you. That's not on me.
Absolutely. Yep.
you know, I'm a good person. I try to do good things, and um, all I wanted was to meet my family. That's it. I don't need anything from you. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like,
Yes. And I do think
I think
that's
there's,
another thing with people in our community that are searching. They don't really want anything. I mean, we're not out there trying to, get rich or anything like that. You just really desire that connection. You
yep.
just want to know where you came from.
Yeah. I know my mother's other son is very physically close to my mother. And he's not okay with this whole thing. He wishes I probably never made the connection, whatever. But his wife, oh, I might even edit this out. She called me recently. I hadn't spoken to her in years, and she cursed me out on the phone and said I was doing this for money. And I'm like, how? I
Mhm.
was like, what? A, I'm not even connected to my mother. B, I'm not doing the podcast to make money. We haven't
Right.
made a dime. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
this is this is a way that I feel like it's healing for me, but I'm hoping that it helps other people feel
Right.
comfortable with their stories. That's the point. It's
Mhm.
and I even feel like at some level I I can be a really proud person, and I feel like 6 years in, the fact that my mother still doesn't want to I'm kind of like, then I don't know if I want it. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
it's like it feels, I don't know, condescend like if she spoke to me now, it'd be like, for why? I mean, like,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
What's
And
changed?
yeah, and anyway, sorry about that. I got going off on a
No, you're
tangent,
great.
didn't I?
You're great.
It's just yeah, it's hard not to have those feelings about it.
Mhm.
It's um and when you don't have answers, you start to assume some things that maybe aren't even true.
Mhm.
Like, I wish somebody could convince me that my mother isn't a homophobe, but I'm not
Mhm.
convinced of that. You know what I mean? So
Right.
I think that's part of the story. I do, and nobody really tries to correct me that's that I
But that's
shouldn't
the
have that
issue.
concern. Yep.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, again, I'm 53. Like, I got my stuff figured out. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Corey and I have been together for 19 years. Like, you should be proud of that. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone
it's
that can stay in a relationship for 19 years, no matter what the dynamic of the relationship is, that's amazing.
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. Like, I'm proud of us. You know what I mean? Like,
And you should be.
and I feel like exactly like,
Yeah.
and I don't, I won't be belittled. You know what I mean? Like, I won't let somebody talk down. I was reading an article today where somebody was equating like, oh well, I love everybody. I love the drug addicts and the um what was the phrase? It was another, and the gay people. And I was like, well, thanks for just lumping me right in there with the things that other people would say are
Yeah.
socially unacceptable. But it's just, yeah, and I'm not always okay with that. Like, it's like, I don't need your approval. I'll just take your acceptance. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, um, tell me about, I think you've got an upcoming retreat.
Yes. So I have partnered with Alexis Hourselt. She does the DNA Surprises podcast. You know her, of course. And we
I
have a
do.
retreat coming up in September. It's going to be in Phoenix. It is September 19th through the 22nd, 23rd, 19th through the 23rd, Thursday to Friday or Sunday. We have 6 different facilitators that are going to talk. We're going to have someone speak about inner child, inner healing. Someone's going to do some betrayal trauma. Speaking about betrayal traumas, we have some movement and sound. We have like a little bit of yoga. You don't have to, if you don't have to be a yoga person for this experience. It's not like that specifically. We're going to have breath
Right.
work, healing your past, present, and future. And then I facilitate a session at the end of the retreat called What's Next. I kind of wrap up
Mm.
everything that we've learned and send people off on a positive note. So um, we had a great retreat last year in Tucson. It was really, really fun. It was better than we could have ever expected. We had some
Mm.
really lovely, lovely experiences there.
Mm.
Um, and this year we're doing it in Phoenix at Saguaro Lake Ranch. It's beautiful. There's little cabins that sit at the bottom of this
Yeah.
mountain, and there's a river that runs through, and it's just a beautiful spot. So we're just kind of there in community. The ranch will provide all of the meals. There's different little cabin options you can share. You can have your own, that kind of thing. So
Mhm.
we're very excited about it. It's going to be really fun.
That sounds so great.
Yeah.
I I mean, it sounds like, and the setting doesn't always matter, but I think it sounds serene in itself, and
Mhm.
I think that can only be helpful to
Yeah.
get people to get their away from their busy lives, right?
Mhm. Yes.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for that. I mean, thank you for helping provide that space for
Oh,
people.
it's just like you said about the podcast. It really is my pleasure. It is something that brings, I believe, Alexis and I both a lot of joy and a lot of healing on our journey. and it's really fun to connect with people. Of course, we're still friends with many of the women that came, and
Sure.
it's really fun. And it's
That's
not
so
just for
great.
women. We would love it if some men came and joined us. It would be fun.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Very good. Very good. Is there anything that, and I can put this in later, is there anything that you wish that we had talked about that I that I should intersperse? Well, Debbie, thank you so much for coming on. It's been
Absolutely.
fun, and I love your story. I think compared to many, I think you and I have had really good experiences with
Yeah.
finding our families. So
Absolutely. I'm very blessed. I get to go see them. I try to go once a quarter. My dad's in his 80s, so of course, I want to
yep,
spend as much time with him as I can. So I've sort of tried to do a little quarterly trip, and it's interesting because I will stay at my brother's house now. And of course, initially you're very trepidatious and you don't know what to expect, right? And
sure,
now I'm like, I'm here, is my room ready? We kind
yep,
of joke about it.
yep,
So I feel really, really
absolutely.
lucky to be part of all of that and just, really blessed the way my journey turned out.
Thank you again for joining us on Family Twist. We hope today's conversation about the DNA Surprise Network and the emotional roller coaster of discovering new family ties has given you insights and maybe even helped those of you on similar journeys feel less alone. Remember, every family story is unique, and navigating these new waters requires patience, understanding, and often a redefinition of what family means. Join us next time as we continue to unravel the incredible stories that shape our lives. Until then, remember, family secrets are the ultimate plot twist. The Family Twist podcast is produced by How the Cow Ate the Cabbage LLC, presented by Savoir Faire Marketing Communications, and features original music by Cosmic Afterthoughts.